Storytelling. The swarm woke first. The EM spike from 48 motors gave them away in seconds. Jammers roared. 3 drones went blind as cables snapped mid-blast, but 9 remained, hardwired by fiber, unfazed by the 30-kilometer blackout. Ahead, an ammo train. Beside it, a Panzer S1 waiting for airborne targets that didn't fly like birds. Watch how ground-skimming paths and delayed fiber detachment confused the autocannons, how a single coupling breach ignited valves, and why the blast vaporized wagons and rail segments meant to feed 3 mechanized divisions. And before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. They had the angles, the radar, the optics, and a straight track to shoot down. So why did a $15 million Defender watch 9 intruders sail through? Start with the promise. Pancer S1 stacks a search radar with an electro-optical sight, then backs it with twin 30mm cannons and missiles that swat cruise missiles at a few kilometers out. On paper, it should see small, fast targets, sort them, and hand off cleanly to guns or a missile shot. In practice, the target set looked nothing like the doctrine. The drones treated the airspace like a rumor and the ground like a highway. The swarm hugged ballast and rail, it rode the shoulder of embankments, bounced throttle against culverts, and drifted at uneven speeds that don't line up with a normal aerial return. Systems tuned to find clean, high Doppler shifts and stable vectors start tossing out the very echoes that matter. Clutter rejection says that smear near the sleepers is probably noise. The software grew confident for the wrong reason. Then the spike hit. 48 brushless motors gulped current at once and lit up the spectrum. That signature pulled the pin on a jamming bubble out to roughly 30 kilometers, the kind that smothers control links and GPS. The defenders expected blindness to follow. The first effects looked promising. Radios died, nets went quiet, and any backup link in the air turned to mush. But 9 drones never offered a radio link to kill. Their control and video stayed on fiber, light down glass, not energy through air, so the blackout passed right through them. Operators saw crisp video, no snow, no lag. The EW truck did its job against anything with an antenna. The fiber ignored it. Meanwhile, the radar kept fighting the ground. Ground skimming profiles blended with the railroad's geometry. Track, sleepers, and angled steel created a mess of micro-reflections. Doppler filters that throw away slow, low returns to clean up the scope cut the legs off the detection of tiny, low-speed targets. The EO/IR channel could help, but the handoff from radar to optics lagged in the noise, and the drones kept slipping behind berms that cooled and warmed unevenly. Every second they stayed indistinct made the next second worse. Targeting logic leaned on prediction. Lead thrives on steady motion. These FPV frames jinked, stall-dipped, and side-slipped in bursts that broke the math. Each burst forced a resolution, and each resolution landed late. The gunner tried to put rounds ahead of a path that didn't hold long enough to matter, missed by a fraction at 97 kilometers per hour, and the stream walks empty air. Operator load spiked. The same jammers that blanked Ukrainian radios also washed over friendly nets and sensors. Inter-unit calls choked. The radar to EO/IR handoff took longer inside the RF fog. Time to impact shrank. Instead of building a track and firming an ID, the crew fought a clock and a screen that never settled. The BTR down the line couldn't pass a warning. Its set lived inside the same bubble. Every tool still worked, but slower than the target timeline allowed. So, what fed the confidence? The spec sheet. Layered sensors. 2 30mm cannons with a 2.5 to 4 kilometer sweet spot, proximity-fused missiles for the fast and the high. It looks great against bigger, smoother threats that announce themselves and keep their bearings. The swarm chose the gaps those specs create, too low for clean geometry, too irregular for prediction, and too quiet in RF to jam. The cannons finally barked. Tracers climbed for arcs the drones refused to fly, and that's when the swarm pulled one more move that turned a near intercept into a clear lane. If the radios went dark, how did 9 drones still thread a rail yard under active fire? The answer starts before the first shot. The launch crews split the swarm into 3 bunkers, each far enough apart that a single 152mm shell couldn't wipe the lot. Spacing wasn't guesswork, it matched the blast radius and fragmentation envelope, so even if counter battery found one site early, at least 8 airframes would survive the first minute. From those pits, the birds climbed on tethers, not antennas. The plan assumed attrition. It also assumed the EW truck would see the spike and flood the sky with noise. The first blast validated the spacing. A shockwave snapped cable on 3 airframes and killed their feeds. The EW vehicle read that dropout as proof its 10 kilowatts of noise worked. It didn't. The real control link never touched the air. The 9 surviving drones held perfect video and tight latency because their data moved as light through glass. Jamming across 100 megahertz to 2 gigahertz can't touch photons inside a fiber. The same way shouting can't stop a flashlight, operators kept a clean image, clean telemetry, and a closed loop under the heaviest saturation the sector could throw. Fiber-linked flight changes the math on precision. With a continuous light path, the control delay stays low enough to steer at 97 kilometers per hour without overshoot. No multipath, no fading, no GPS loss. Terrain masking helps the drones, it doesn't hurt the operators. Every correction, from a 2-degree yaw to a throttle pulse over a culvert, lands when it should. That's why the feed looked normal, while radios in every vehicle on both sides turned to static and dead carriers. The EW bubble did serious work on everything else. It just didn't touch the neurons guiding those 9 airframes. Timing finished the trick. The crews delayed fiber detachment until the last safe moment, keeping guidance crisp through the dirtiest, most jammed segment. Each spool carried slack, paying out as the drones advanced. Only when autocannon engagement grew likely and the spools neared their 12,000-meter limit did the release trip. At that distance, a handoff to any backup signal lasted seconds, not minutes. By then, the beaten zone and the fire control cycle had to be perfect or the window closed. The drones chose the handoff, the guns had to guess it. Now the gun geometry bites. A 30mm autocannon once led on a line that holds. The fire control computer loves steady vectors. The drones denied it. They ground-skimmed, rode the embankment shoulder, then yawed across culvert mouths, changing apparent speed and aspect faster than the system could refresh a solution. Every jink forced new lead, every stall dip reset the range gate. Tracers walked bright arcs overhead while the target stayed in the seam between berm and ballast. The operator elevated for aerial paths. The threat moved like ground truth. That misread opened a lane to the locomotive. One FPV airframe tucked under the coupler and set a shaped charge into the locomotive rail interface. The jet cut metal, the coupling pin deformed, and the shock tripped fuel valves. Another drone tore a brake line farther back, wheels locked and heat rose. A second shaped charge punched an ammo car. Thermite poured onto the track behind the consist, burning at white heat and chewing through steel, so escape routes turned into molten gaps. Then the blasts rolled. Wagon 22 went high order, shredding its neighbors and turning rails into scrap. About that sensor spike at startup, the simultaneous draw of 48 brushless motors created a sharp event that triggered Russian EW. The jammers did exactly what they were built to do, but Fiber ignored them. That's how 9 airframes closed and delivered cascading damage, even as screens across the junction screamed interference. With rails cut and wagons igniting, logistics didn't just slow, the timetable broke on contact. High-end air defenses fail when targets pretend to be ground noise and refuse to fly like aircraft. That mismatch lets cheap FPV frames slip through gaps baked into radar filters, fire control logic, and crew workflow. Specs don't save you if your assumptions are wrong. Study behavior. Ask what your algorithm ignores, what your operator expects, and how a $500 drone breaks both in 10 seconds